Welcome to season 14 of the Parenting Aces podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Stone, and this week we are talking the mental side of tennis. And I am super excited to have with us Damon Valentino. Damon is a sports psychologist. He works with players at all levels. He is a former junior player, a former collegiate player, a former professional player who has turned his passion for the game toward the mental side of things, which all of you know is such a key element of making or breaking a junior tennis experience. We have kids that come out of the womb able to handle all the stressors of playing this individual sport. And then we have kids who need some education and support around that. And that's what we're here to offer today. So I hope that you guys will pay very close attention to the very specific tips that Damon shares, not only for our kids, but also for us as parents to have a better overall junior tennis journey. Damon has graciously offered a discount on his services, which you will find in the show notes. There will be a code for you to use, and we'll have all that in the show notes, which you can find on parentingaces.com or wherever you're consuming this podcast. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Damon Valentino. Damon Valentino, welcome to the podcast. It's always fun to get somebody new and to connect with somebody that I haven't previously connected to in this space. So thrilled you could be here with us this week.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm really excited as well. This is a near and dear to my heart, and it's great to see that you're, really raising this awareness around what it is to be a parent of a high-performance tennis player. It's a huge need, and it's something I hear a lot about. So I'm excited to talk about it more.
Awesome. So before we jump into the crux of our conversation today, I would love for you to give our audience a little bit of your background in tennis and also on the mental side of things.
Sure. Yeah. I grew up in Michigan, and I grew up very much in a sports mindset, played a lot of different sports. And at 9, I picked up a racket at the public Parks and Rec course, and somehow was sort of spotted as a person who might have some talent in this game. And I really took to it pretty quickly. And, by 11, I was in the state championship finals and heading to San Diego for the national hard courts, and really, took a pretty traditional, competitive route, nationally ranked player, really. I'm from the Agassi, Sampras, Martin, Courier, Malavai, Washington generation. And so, a lot of battles with those types of guys, and, I find my way to D1. I've got a full ride to play at Michigan State University. Played a little bit on the satellite tour. Quickly realized that my playing days were I've maxed out, and turned to coaching and spent about a decade, kind of high performance coaching, working with players. But I think from the mental side of things, as a young person, I experienced the high highs and the low lows. Flow state, being in the zone. We called it treeing back in my era. I don't know if they're still calling it that, but just
I
sort of
am,
like,
if nobody else is.
yeah, exactly. But I also developed the yips as a teenager, just this unbearable amount of pressure. And so the mind to me was always the differentiator between, were you going to be, top 100, top 10. And so I was fascinated with that and went back to graduate school, got a master's degree in sport performance psychology. And yeah, I've really tried to merge, my experience as a player, sort of the education and coaching side of the game, but really at the center of it all, for me at least, is sort of the mental side of the game.
So I get this question a lot, and that is, at what age should junior players start working on the mental side of the game? I know my answer, but I am no expert, so I am going to defer to you, Damon.
I think it's the earlier the better, I guess, would be my general answer to that question. And when we say working on the mental side of the game, I think the perception is there's a problem that needs to be fixed. And so, okay, now we'll get the mental coach in. I'm seeing things that are, suboptimal or dysregulated from my son or daughter. And I think it should be embedded into the training from the get-go. We're so heavily on technical, tactical, physical. And I think without adding that mental and emotional piece early on, and it doesn't have to be, it can be age appropriate for sure, but just controlling attention, understanding emotions, being able to utilize techniques like breathing and understanding that the body really does play a really influential role on what the mind even thinks. So, I think we can do this in a way 10 years old, 9 years old, where it's not sophisticated, but it's sort of wiring in those habits. And I think when they're embedded early, then we mitigate some of those problems that we might see 14 years old or even, 15, 16, and the pressure situations and strategies are already kind of built in.
Can you talk a little bit about rituals and the importance of rituals, both in preparing to play, practicing, competing? I said both, but now I'm listing four things. And then recovery. And what is ritual? How do we find the ones that work for us?
Yeah, I think in this era in particular, one of the primary challenges that I see is distraction. And it's true for all of us, right? Whether it's, apps on our phone or, notifications, just the world is always trying to capture our attention. And so when I think of rituals, I actually think this is like strength conditioning for the mind. And what we're really doing is we're setting our intention and coaching our own brain to prepare for something that we're about to do. And so often we sort of like, go from one thing to the next to the next. Maybe I'm in school, maybe mom drives me to tennis, maybe I'm walking out on the courts, maybe I'm talking to my friends and I unzip my bag and next thing I know I'm hitting balls. And without that break, without that, a discipline to establish some rituals or routines, we're doing ourselves a disservice and we're often practicing scattered. And so, before we enter into the courts, for example, thinking of a specific cue, hearing the zip of the bag open, for example, and it's just a way for us to start to train our own mind. Oh, I'm here. I'm stepping into tennis mode, and there are elements of my character that need to be online when I'm doing this activity, and I might have a lot on my mind as well. And so I'm giving myself permission to step out of school, of stress, of relationship, of, the fight I got in the car on the way over here, whatever it is, right? So rituals are our way of having agency. There's nothing more radical nowadays than we talk about controlling the controllables a lot. What is it to control? And I'm really saying that you're controlling your mind, your mindset, how you're showing up. And so we can really get a lot more quality out of what we're doing when we set that intention, train our attention. And so pre-match rituals, of course, they're about arousal regulation, intensity, focus, visualizing ourselves at our best, maybe visualizing how we'll overcome challenges. And then, of course, tennis is one of those great sports where there's so many natural breaks. So we got 25 seconds in between every single point, 90 seconds every other game. What are we doing in those times? And those are really important, periods to think about tennis as like connected in that way. So
Yeah.
just real quick for me, it's in between points. I think it's feeling, it's monitoring, it's controlling, it's planning, and it's engaging. So in other words, if you hit a passing shot down the
All in
line,
25 seconds.
right? Yeah. And
Yeah.
so 5 seconds to feel whether it's good or negative or positive emotion after a point. We're human beings. We feel. If I rip a passing shot, I'm excited. If I shank an overhead, I'm upset, right? So I think we do ourselves a disservice if we don't just at least process that. But then we check in with the body and monitor, how's my breathing? Am I gassed? How are my legs? And then maybe taking a little control with a conscious breath, and And then thinking about the next point, right? I'm going to slide a serve wide and I'm going to hunt a forehand, right? And then maybe a little action like, okay, let's go. Right. I think the more like that's a ritual that it doesn't have to be robotic, in nature. Everybody has to kind of make it their own. But when we do that, not only are maximizing ourselves to get ready for the next thing, but equally important, we're not ruminating on the thing that just happened or the thing that might happen. Oh gosh, if I lose this game, I'll be down a break and then he's serving for it and his UTR is a point lower than mine, right? Like all that stuff comes up. So we have to fill in the space. We have to give our mind a job. And so I think rituals are really important for that.
It's funny because I've talked about this before. Years ago, I was at the US Open Juniors. I was sitting behind a coach who was coaching her player in the juniors.
Yeah.
But she was up in the stands, and after each point, she would say to her player, next point, next point.
Yeah.
And I talked to her after and I'm like, what was that about? And she's like, I just want to remind her that it's only about the next point. The point she just played is done. She needs to put it away. It's about the next point. And that really hit a nerve with me in a positive way.
Hmm.
That we do tend to, it's human nature, as you said, we do tend to dwell on, especially something that didn't go the way we wanted. And it impedes our ability to then move forward and correct or improve or just move past that
Hmm.
thing that happened and is done and there's nothing we can do about.
Right. Yeah. No, you're right. It's a simple, sentence, next point. And this is stuff that we work through in training. It's has to be done over and over, just like you would practice a kick serve 1,000 times. You have to build in this next point mentality, with your players. And I think also parents need to be thinking this way as well, right? It's really easy to get caught up in the drama of whatever it is that's happening with our kids. And I think it's important to model that kind of next point mentality, not even just inside the lines, but this is something that we can start to prompt our kids to develop in their day-to-day lives as well.
Yeah. And let's talk about the parents a minute
Yeah.
because, Parenting Aces, we're all about the parents and trying to help parents navigate this journey, but to do it in a way such that they have a great relationship with their child at the end of it.
Mhm.
And also in a way such that the parent doesn't go off the deep end in the process because we know when it's our child out there doing something, we feel helpless, we feel stress, it's like you're on edge waiting for that thing to happen, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. So our own internal processes start boiling up. And I think one of the hardest things for me when my child was going through this was exactly what you just mentioned. Oh, this kid's got a lower, back then it wasn't UTR because that wasn't around yet, but this kid's ranked below my kid. If my kid loses here, this is like huge. And yeah, come on, right?
Yeah.
So can you give some tips to those of us sitting in the stands watching our children do this thing, and to help us practice what we preach, but also model the behavior that we're hoping to see in our children.
Mm. Yeah, first of all, I'm also a parent. My daughter is nearly 13, and even though I'm a professional in this space, being a parent often overrides anything else that you might be thinking rationally or logically. My daughter was just running track, and I was videoing her race, and I watched it back, and I was kind of mortified at my own. I was like barking out this, keep going, keep pushing, keep pushing. So I guess first of all, I want to normalize this for parents. Let's just make the assumption we want the best for our kids. we unconditionally love them. We would do anything. We'd move mountains for our kids, right? And at the same time, with that, I think it's important to then strategize about what are the effective ways what's the goal? A goal is, in my opinion, to raise kids who are self-determined, who can problem solve, who are resilient, but that also feel unconditionally loved. And so I think that number one, it's really important for parents to understand the teenage brain and just how dualistic it is. And so if we give them more adoration when they win, and then we're real quiet and we're sitting on our hands when they lose, the teenage brain says, when I win, I get more love. When I lose, I get less love. Right. And so, that's important, I think, as parents, for us to just, have that understanding of. Um, but to your point about modeling, I think that's really kind of where I like to go is, we learned in sort of counseling classes when I was in graduate school, when you're listening to somebody, 95% of the time you should be spent like thinking about how you are feeling. So you want to stay in your own body. You want to be grounded. So if you're in the stands, you ought to be breathing, right? You ought to be feeling your feet on the ground, right? You ought to be focused on your posture, even your facial expression, and sort of modeling that type of behavior that you really want to share with your kids. Our nervous systems are talking to each other, right? And so we often use the language as our communication strategy, but if the language doesn't match the nervous system, there's this disconnect as well. So number one, check in with yourself while you're watching. And that is a really important check in with your breathing. Maybe even get into a little bit of a coherent breathing where you're breathing in for 3, out for 3, and being very clear and consistent about that. I think number two, as a supporter of your kids, it does kind of think about that next point mentality where, we want to embody that kind of resilience that we want to see from our kids. For me, I think it's important to kind of plan out what you're looking for on the court. We whatever we want whatever we want to pay attention to, we often find, right? And so for me, when I give advice to parents, I say really hone in on attitude, effort level, and problem solving strategies.
I
And
like that.
the reason that one is so important is because things are going to go wrong out there, right? And if we focus on, oh no, the thing went wrong, then we start to kind of see it more often. Whereas if we sort of, are in the mindset of like, okay, now what are they going to try now that something went wrong? Then the car ride home it's all about that type of stuff, like, wow, great attitude out there, your effort level was top notch. And and when you got broke, I really saw how you went to your rituals and your behaviors, and I even saw how you changed some tactics. That was really great that you were trying a new strategy. And those are really deeply grounding for kids to hear. And with those in mind, then kids start to feel like, hey, I can take some risks out there, and I can kind of, stay focused on what it is that I'm trying to do and really live that next point type of mentality.
So I just want to say one thing about that, the car ride home,
Yeah.
because we all know, we've all lived it. Even if you do those things and you do them in a very calm and loving way, your kid, if they just lost a match, may not respond the way you want them to respond,
Yep.
but they're still hearing you. They're still feeling your intention,
Hmm.
and they they may not reflect it in the moment. They may
Hmm.
be a total jerk to you in the car because they're feeling bad that they lost. And you know what? They should feel bad that they lost. It's no fun to lose, right? I mean, you
Right.
can't expect immediately after a match for your kid to be able to take that step back and say, I lost, but oh my gosh, I hit my forehand down the line so much better today. An hour from now, they may be able to do that, or
Yeah.
maybe a day from now. But in the
Yeah.
moment, let's not expect this perfect behavior when they've just had a disappointing result. at the same time, we still need to say and do the things to help them work through what they're feeling. Right?
Hmm.
Am I saying that properly?
Yeah, you are. And I think it's most important after a match in that ride home to be a parent first, right? You may, and I don't always advise this, but sometimes parents are coaches of their kids.
Right.
But even if they're not coaches, they're sort of armchair coaches. And right. And
Yeah.
that's a slippery slope because you are now, really honing in on them as a tennis player as their identity when it really should probably start with, hey, what do you want for dinner? Right? Like and also just giving that space for them to process. I work with some D1 schools and we have kind of a time frame rule where if there's a tough loss, we kind of circle X amount of time, maybe a couple hours, maybe a 24-hour rule or something like that, where you can feel the feels and process all of that. And you're right, like the more we create that space for them, um, we could be saying the right things, but if it's at the wrong time, then it's going to be a net negative for sure. So yeah, I really appreciate you saying that. I think that's absolutely
Well,
right.
and what I want is for parents to come away from this podcast understanding that you may be doing all the right things
Mhm.
and your child may not be ready to see or hear that in that moment, but that doesn't mean you should stop doing those things. Even if they behave poorly, you're still doing the right thing and that needs to continue because over time your child will start to recognize it. And listen, it may take till they're 17 or it may take till they're 30, but there are different rates of maturity in our
Mhm.
kids. Boys mature slower than girls as a whole, but that doesn't mean you don't keep doing the right things as their parent.
Mhm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. When if I do a keynote or something like that, like often the title is From Fixing to Transforming.
Oh,
And
I
as
like that.
right, as
Yeah,
parents,
yeah, we all
as
want to fix.
we all want to fix, like, and we go right in there. Where's that weak spot? Let's just shore that up, and then everything will be fine. But we oftentimes we can exacerbate guilt and shame when we do that. And again, behaviorally, as a parent might be doing the right things too. And a child may be behaving in ways that aren't necessarily, optimal or ideal, but it may not also be their fault. And they may just be, this could be a natural expression of being under a lot of pressure. So uh, I think we have to shift the paradigm in thinking about kind of the suck it up mentality and understand that what we're talking about right now, these are not soft skills. They've kind of fallen under that category of soft skills. There's nothing more rugged than allowing a human being to process and to go through what it is that they're feeling. But there are some tips, right? And I think for parents, the ones that I think have adopted some of these very simple tips, at least when I work with them, they're incredibly liberated because we want to do the right thing as a parent. We want to maximize our support. So the first one is just to be careful about I statements, right? I think you should, and the should statements. Like
Yeah,
those are like
brutal.
they're brutal. Like the guilt and the shame comes up. Like if you're hearing, and also where they're not in the driver's seat. Now you are. Literally, you're driving the car and you're driving the conversation as well. So it's really important to even these subtle shifts in language, like it looks like, it sounds like, it feels like. This is you're now making an observation as opposed to just wrangling control of the conversation.
Mm.
And then the other ones are really open-ended questions, like instead of saying like, at break point, you should have gone down the line on that one play, and if you would have, then you would have cracked open for you. Again, you've now taken over control of the conversation. Instead, hey, what were some of the things that you were thinking about there? What were some of the possibilities that you were exploring? How was it that you decided to make that play or to work that pattern? Again, you're allowing your child to process still in the driver's seat. And that's just like that, I think, is a really fundamentally important thing. And now they get to develop and transform, and they normalize this failure or challenge or whatever it is. And so I think they can be really helpful. Keep a little cheat sheet of these questions, like by the steering wheel.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And listen, it's not just the language you use, but it's also your tone of voice, it's your body language. And I think car conversations, I always found those to be the least stressful time to have conversations, because your child's not having to look at you and you're not having to look at your child. So you really have to focus on your tone of voice and your word choice, because you don't have that eye contact. And, saying what you just said, the way you just said it, Damon, is very different from saying, what was going through your head right then? So
Yeah.
understand it's not just the words, but it's the words plus the tone of voice plus the body language. I mean, we know all this intellectually. I can't imagine this is news to anybody watching or listening to this, but I think it's important that we get these reminders from time to time to kind of check in with ourselves about how we're delivering the messages that we're hoping our children receive in a positive way.
No, that's a great point. When you talk about rituals, I think parents, equally can model rituals as well. So before getting in the car, take a deep breath, right? Remember the objective. What's the objective? Oh, it's for my kid to be able to process what just happened. Maybe feel your feet on the ground, or just finding ways to become a little more mindful so that before you do share information, you're in the right state, and they're going to be able to receive it a little bit better as well.
Yeah, I love that. I love
You know?
that. All right. I have to talk to you about choking, because
Mhm.
this is a topic that comes up all the time. I would venture to say 99.99999% of tennis players experience choking at some point,
Me
whether
too.
me too all the time. Um, but when it's our kid out there and we're the
hmm
ones sitting in the stands watching it, oh my
hmm
God, it's brutal. I mean,
hmm
first of all, it's brutal for the kid, but it's also brutal for us as parents. So, can we talk a little bit about the psychology of choking, help
hmm
parents understand what's happening in the brains of our kids or in the bodies of our kids when this is going on,
hmm
so that we can be more useful after the fact?
Yeah, it's same for me. This is a huge topic, and let's start with a little bit of the science, because I think it's important to kind of have that kind of lining rationale. It's not a weakness. The way I would frame it is choking is an example of the brain trying to protect the person who in the body, the event, the experience. So the brain sort of like wrestles the attention and says, "All right, I'm going to override these intuitive muscle memories, and because this is such a huge moment, I'm going to kind of like take over command central." And one example I might share is for people just to kind of get a sense of what it might feel like. If you were to stand up and take 10 steps down the sidewalk, and on that walk, your brain was instructing your body what to do. Pick up your leg, bend your knee, propel your foot forward, put your heel down, put the rest of your foot down, move the other foot forward, right? We would fall over, right? So it's an over instruction, first of all. And so when we think of it that way, okay, that can make some sense. Like the brain is trying to tell the body what to do. Whereas, you know, most players have hit more backhands than McDonald's has sold hamburgers, so we have to get out of the way and let the body do what it knows how to do. So that being said, sort of being the underlying challenge, I think is helpful because it's like, oh, okay, if that's the story, it's not because I'm mentally weak. It's because my brain is overriding and trying to control, the functioning of my body because it thinks it's this threat situation. So, that I think is a really good starting place. And so if that's the case, we need to give the brain a job. Right. And so because right now the brain is like taken over and it's kind of, running the asylum, if you will. So we have to give it a job. And the first job we need to give it is for it to be curious. Not about what? Not language. Language is where oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, this is a huge game, a huge point. Oh my gosh, I'm choking. Everything is falling off the rails. I'm looking at mom. She looks panicked, right? Like the mind is not the place that we're going to liberate ourselves from choking. But if the brain checks in with the body, and this is where I think it gets really interesting and kind of counterintuitive. Let's say you're up 5-4 in the third serving for the match and you're in the chair, tense and your mouth is dry, your heart's flying. We all know that feeling. Oh my God, I have to hold here. This is a huge, massive game. In that moment, if we can check in with the body, what's my heart? How check in with my heartbeat. Check in with the tension level in my body. Check in with my breathing. We're giving the brain a job to do. And that job is to monitor our most important instrument, our body. So by definition, though, now we're not in that reel, that thought trap. And so when we can then kind of find that optimal state, and this is where I think some of the work off the court happens. So what one of my primary skills that I teach players is this. It's what does it feel like in your body when you're confident, when you feel good out there, when you're going for your shots, when you're feeling, just like you're proud. What's that feel like? And at first it's a hard question to answer, like, well, what does it feel like? It's because we spend so much time here and we really don't have enough connection to what our body is doing and feeling. And so step one is the brain is taking over. Step two is give the brain a job. Step three, the job is to check in with the body. And then step four is can we manipulate the body through breathing, behaviors, the towel, some water, some of these things that are part of our ritual and routines. And then if we can do all those things, we're still in the experience. And I
Right.
think that goes a long way to then being able to do what we know how to do, which is play the game,
Right. I
right?
mean, it's interesting because I have heard, watching tennis on TV, I've heard from coaches watching them work with children. Um, when a player starts to panic, which is
Hmm.
basically what choking is, it's a panic
Hmm.
situation,
Hmm.
they'll say, go back to the basics, go back to the
Hmm.
basics. But that's not what you're saying. That's
Hmm.
that's very different from what you're saying.
Hmm.
And I have been in that situation where I've heard that in my head when I've been choking, go back to the basics, focus on your stroke, focus on your footwork, blah, 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 blah. Sometimes it works, but a lot of times it really doesn't work.
Right, exactly. And this is, I think, where I think this is a really important point that we're talking about right here. If we're in a panic state, and then we're trying to solve the problem. We're trying to solve the problem in a panicked state. And when we panic, for example, if when we're our nervous system is regulated, we have about 180 degrees of peripheral vision. I'm
Yeah.
regulated right now. I can see both walls in my room pretty clearly. When I get into that panic state, that shrinks down to about 30 degrees.
Oh,
So
interesting.
we get into this tunnel vision. Cognitively, we drop. right? Blood comes to our primary organs. So our arms are really tight. And we're in that state. It feels like life or death. And so if we go back to the basics, when we feel like we're in a life-threatening situation, usually there's a fundamental disconnect with that. So you're right. What I'm saying is regulate first, solve second, right? And it doesn't take a lot of time to shift our state. A couple of breath practices, that are kind of quickly, are capable of getting us into doing, kind of back into that regulated state. We learn these things from the military and first responders and certainly, high performance athletes as well. And so that's the step one is, get clear first, and then you'll remember the plan.
Mm,
So again, when those 25 seconds in between points, you know, most of it should be about just getting clear,
I love that. I love
right?
that.
Yeah.
And again, this is not something that you're going to share with your child and boom, they're going to put it into practice right away and be great at it. This is something that develops over time, and it's something just like the rituals. They have to be practiced in practice. This is
Hmm.
why practice matches are so important, because it gives our kids a chance to be in these pressure situations and try implementing these types of tools that Damon's talking about. If you try and hand your kid a playbook of tools, mental tools, physical tools, whatever it is, the right before they walk on the match court, and this is the first time they're seeing it, come on, you can't expect that that's going to work.
Right.
So understand that all of this stuff takes practice over and over and over again. Just like Damon, you were saying, these kids have hit more backhands and hamburgers have been
Hmm.
sold.
Hmm.
They have to practice this stuff the same way that they're practicing their forehands, backhands, serves, volleys, yada yada.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Lisa. And, we manage what we measure. And it's so easy for us to measure the technical, tactical stuff. The sports science has come so far, stroke analysis, all of these things, all is so, it's amazing, and the sophistication is awesome. But this is the invisible stuff over
Right.
here. And so we need to bring it into the light, meaning we have to be very, explicit about it being part of the training. And if it is part of the training, then we have to look for it when it's happening, and then we have to praise it. And if we do these things, it's interesting. I would say this is the kind of stuff, though, that yes, we have to get the reps. Yes, we have to wire in these habits. But I would say, unlike a kick serve that maybe you need thousands and thousands to get that confidence in the muscle memory, this is like unlocking something that's already there. And
I like
so,
that.
right, so if you think of a key as an analogy, and most keys look exactly the same, but with the small changes in the grooves, now suddenly this key unlocks a specific door. And so the keys are basically all of these skills, like these to regulate our emotions and to practice these mental reps with these things. But you never quite know when it's going to unlock or click. But certainly, to your point, it has to be baked into the training. And when we're reviewing what we just did, you did this, you did this. Oh, I saw you take a breath when you hit the towel, right? I saw you kind of readjust your posture, right? What were you thinking about in the chair? Were you still kind of, in my language, I say online, right? Like, were you still online, or did you kind of go on to autopilot, right? Curiosity is really important with all of this. And so if we're asking questions about these things, just by definition, our players, our kids are going to start to buy into the fact that, oh, this is has to be on the menu as well. You don't get there without getting these things, right? I
Yeah.
mean, if I was working with a group of kids, how much of you winning is mental? What percentage? What would you guess roughly people say? How important is the mental game for you winning?
I mean, I would guess that most people say 50%, but
50, 60,
we know
70,
it's
80.
greater than that. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And the follow-up is how much are you training those things, right? And usually that's a low number.
Yeah.
So we're expecting our kids to be mental giants without putting in the kind of work or the reps to be able to demonstrate that. And so I think when we look back at choking, have we gotten the pressure? Have we built in these pressure situations enough to regulate first and then plan second? And that's really the core, I think, of kind of untangling that knot of choking. Yeah.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah.
Okay. We're coming to the end of our hour. So I want to
Yeah.
make sure we touch on something that is very important to me, which is helping parents understand what type of pressure our high performance athletes feel when they're practicing, when they're giving up something for their sport, and then when they're out there competing. And I think, for those of us who played sports as kids, I mean, I played, but I didn't play at nearly the level that my kid played. Sometimes we either forget or we just really don't understand what's happening inside of our kids and how we can add to that pressure or hit the release valve for them.
Right. Yeah, no, it is. It's a great question. One of my jobs, I'm the director of mental fitness for the PTPA, and I oversee the top 250 in the world on the ATP and WTA. And you see these young generations coming into the pro game and, experiencing a lot of pressure, bigger crowds, bigger stage, all of that stuff. But if you go back 3, 4, 5 years, usually you'll see which ones are going to be able to handle that, and then maybe which ones are going to struggle when they get there. And I think the first thing to understand from a parental perspective is that our players, they're so good at this game, and they have so they if they've reached a certain level, it's impossible to not identify almost entirely as a tennis player, right? Like we may ask questions sometimes, what else are you? I'm a brother, I'm a son, I'm a student, I'm a surfer, all these things. But in the adolescent brain, it's kind of an all or nothing situation. And so the pressure they feel is not just as a tennis player, but it's as a human being almost entirely. So imagine that for a moment, that when the experience of playing a tennis match quite literally is going to be the determining factor whether you don't just lose a tennis match when you're under that kind of pressure. You are a loser when you're under that kind of pressure. So that's what they're feeling. They're feeling like it's life or death. And intellectually, they can say, oh, I know it's just a tennis match. But when they get out there, especially if they've fused their identity to the game, it's very, very difficult to, not take it as a life death situation. So that's a big part of it. And then I think probably more so now than ever, the externals are so powerful. Social media, everybody's got some kind of video of their playing. Everyone's scrolling Instagram, seeing everybody else. Everybody knows your UTR. There are all of these data-driven and external factors that end up becoming the rationale for motivation. Like, if I win, I can post and then my score might go up. Now, on its face, it's not wrong. It's not a terrible thing, but when it's out of balance for the deeper meaning for playing the game. So there's the extrinsic motivators, and then there's the intrinsic motivators. And we really need to keep coaching our kids. Why does it matter to you? What does it feel like to go through the process? They have to be the ultimate judge in their own ability out there and their own growth. So, but that's often not the case, right? Often the case is the world judges them, and everything external, it becomes this pressure. The walls are closing in. So they've fuse their identity to this. The whole world is judging them based on this, and it's very dualistic. I either won or I lost, right? And so if they come off the court and they lost, they can't find anything good about that experience because they lost, right? And
Right.
so it's a big challenge, and it's this is why I like to start with normalize again. This is the reality for our kids. So of course there are many things that we can do to strategize and then ultimately, hopefully, optimize so that they reclaim, in my language, they reclaim the game. They play their own game. They create their own rules and they judge themselves based on their own metrics. And if they can do that more consistently, they develop what everybody knows is there's the kind of the primary, which is self-determination. You know, they have
Hmm.
autonomy. They've created the rules. They have mastery. They're learning through failing and they're mastering their craft. And then they have belonging. Like they feel like they're part of something that where they can share that reality. So that pressure is real. It feels like life or death. It's often feels like it's not in their control. And as parents, we have to empathize with them when they're in that state.
Well, and that goes back to maintaining a growth mindset through this journey, right? That it's not about the outcome of the match only.
Mhm.
Certainly that comes into play, but also, you know, what did you learn today? And but the famous quote, I either won or I learned. Like,
Yeah.
easy for us as adults who aren't on the court doing it to say,
Mhm.
much
Mhm.
more difficult for our children to say and really believe and feel in their soul,
Mhm.
that even though I lost the match, I have things that I can take from this that are going to make me a better tennis player and a better human ultimately. But today it
Yeah.
feels really sucky.
Yeah, no kidding. That's very true. And the optimism in this situation though is when we do reclaim the game a little bit and start to measure and manage these metrics that we've determined are important for our own development and transformation. Like under pressure, I went for my shots, right? Like under pressure, I stuck to my rituals and I actually remembered that, oh my gosh, I'm panicked. I have to breathe, right? If we measure these things and we praise them and we get these small mini win moments, uh, the other thing about our own system is that feels good. And really what's a growth mindset? It's when we make small progress, when we feel like we're on the right track is what it is. And we get
Yeah.
dopamine from that, right? And so, I think we have to use the biology in our favor as well. It's not just the panic state. There's also this other part of us that if we can, kind of switch on those neurochemicals, then there's a genuine sense that, hey, I didn't just say I got better today, and I'm not using a cliche like growth mindset, right? I actually know I feel it inside, right?
Hmm.
And if we can plant that seed for our kids and start to water those things, they start to notice that they're changing. And that's the ultimate. Like when they hit their growth edge, we want them to be curious. We want them to realize, hey, actually, I can get through this. I can kind of crack this thing a little bit. Now that becomes the fun part, right? Those are the players that really make it. If you listen to Alcaraz, he says, I don't focus on my level. I focus on my entertainment and my joy. And if I can hit a trick shot and it can make me smile, then my level comes, right? So I think if we focus on behavior first, then often then the game will flow after that.
Okay, one last quick question because
Yeah.
I would be remiss if I didn't address this.
Yeah.
Is there a point at which you look at your child, they're not able to do all of these things that you and I are talking about today, and you
Mhm.
say, you know what, this isn't for my kid, it's time to find something else? And how do you recognize when you've hit that point?
I mean, it's really the $1 million question in a lot of
Mm.
ways, right? I mean,
Hence
first,
my asking it of you.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess, you're first things first, I do feel like there's value for people like me to be supportive in this process. So I think parents often, again, we heavily skew technical tactical. My kid's, he's working on his patterns and his grips and everything else. That's great, but how about the mental and emotional side? So if there's an imbalance there, I think you would do yourself and your kid a service to be able to add that, and maybe that unlocks something for them, right? Um, at some point though, I think the deeper question needs to be asked, which is why? Why are we doing this, right? And there has to be some semblance of motivation underlying and joy. Like if we forget that this is a game that we're playing, right? We're supposedly playing a game. And if it becomes so serious and so, kind of dark in its energy and just sort of disruption within the family and, X amount of money and traveling out all weekend and everything else, yeah, I think there needs to be some reconsideration there. At the end of the day, we want our children to have a solid mental health, you know, uh, you know, state as well. And frankly, I don't think I know this for sure. You can catch lightning in a bottle for a little while, but if there isn't well-being along with high performance, at some point it's going to burn out. And so, I think when we look at assessing whether one should stay or not, there has to be a foundational level of well-being that's still present for our kids. They can be driven and they can be grinding and going after it, but there still needs to be that kind of foundation of well-being. When that gets shaky, that to me, that's the red flag.
And then
Maybe,
it's okay
right?
to take a break, and maybe they recover from that and reset and are able to come back and find their joy again, or maybe not. And,
That's right.
we're the adults in the room. We, the parents, are the adults in the room. And I think, I talk a lot about communication on this podcast, whether it's between parent and child, parent and coach, coach and child. The communication has to be there. And I I encourage the parents that I work with one-on-one to have these conversations with your child regularly, every 3 months, every 6 months. Do you
Mm,
still love this? Why are you doing it? What is it you hope to achieve? Are you willing to put the work in to get there?
mm,
And create that space for them to have honest conversation with you and to feel comfortable tapping into their emotion and sharing that with you as their parent, because we're the adult in the room. We have to model and create space for these types of conversations to happen.
I love that. One tip off of that is to use time as a container. So whether it is, okay, let's go hard for 30 days and then we'll see what happens, or let's take a break for 30 days and let's just sort of allow ourselves to kind of decompress a little bit. But it's very grounding for the brain to think in terms of containers.
I love
So,
that.
you
That's
know,
great.
right. And so, figure out your own system in terms of time, but we can go hard for 7 days, or that's why, we love the 30-day challenge, right? This is type of model. But also the 30 days of just rest or 30 days where it's just off. And there's something very grounding about that because it's not forever. But it's a safe space to maybe look and act and think differently. And then we'll revisit it when we hit that time frame. So
Yeah, that's
yeah.
fantastic. That's fantastic. Okay, Damon, if
Yeah.
people want to get in touch with you, how do they do
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, so I have a couple of different ways of doing that. I have a company, it's called Side Street Performance Coaching, and that is kind of a high performance coaching model that I use. I also own mentalfitnessprograms.com, where it's a little bit more of a holistic type of training. So Side Street Performance Coaching is probably the best way that parents would get a hold of me. You can book an introductory call. And I have a lot of my my information on there, and I'm also just happy to check in with people. So reach out anytime. This is just near and dear to my heart, both personally and professionally. So love to hear from parents, coaches, and I love to work with the players as well. So.
And we'll have those links in the show notes on parentingaces.com. So don't worry, just check those out. You'll get the link, just click, and you'll be right in touch with Damon and can take a look at all of the things that he can offer and bring to the table for your young athlete. Damon, thank you so much for taking time to chat with us. It has been a pleasure, and I hope that parents will take your words of wisdom to heart and put them into practice and, start thinking about the mental side of the game a little bit differently. I think that's really important.
Well, thank you, Lisa. And again, huge admiration for you raising awareness for this important, topic. And, parents play such a crucial role in our kids' development. And we all want to do great. And sometimes I think learning a skill or two can really help a lot. So love what you're doing. It's great.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
To my audience, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time on Parenting Aces.